For 6 years, Lovely served him tea every morning at exactly 6:15. For 6 years, Hanel never once looked up from his phone. Until the morning she didn't come at all. Lovely had learned to love quietly. 6 years in the Choi household had taught her the shape of Hanil's silence, how he took his coffee black on court days, how his jaw tightened before bad news arrived, how he never said thank you but always left his door unlocked for her to bring his evening tea. She told herself it didn't matter that he never saw her. Some love was patient. Some love simply waited. "You're still here," his assistant, Ji-woo, said one evening, watching Lovely arrange roses in the hallway vase for the third time that week. Always fresh, always precise. 6 years and he still calls you the tea lady. He has a lot on his mind, Lovely said. Though the words tasted thinner each time she said them, Ji-woo lowered her voice. "Lovely, I've watched you rearrange your whole life around a man who doesn't know your last name. When does it end?" Lovely didn't answer. She simply picked up the tray and walked toward his study, the way she had 1,000 times before, knocking once, then letting herself in when no answer came. Because in 6 years, there never was one. Hanul sat behind his desk, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and clipped, the kind of voice that made grown men flinch in boardrooms. He didn't look up. He never did. She set the tray down without a sound and turned to leave. If you've ever loved someone who never noticed you were there, drop "I understand her" in the comments. Let's see how many of us have been lovely. That was the night everything began to change. Because the next morning, for the first time in 6 years, Lovely didn't come. Act 2, the empty chair. Hanul reached for his coffee at 6:15 and found nothing there. He frowned at the bare tray table, an irritation he couldn't name creeping under his skin. He buzzed the intercom. "Where is she?" Ji-woo's voice was careful. "Lovely was taken to the hospital last night, sir. She collapsed at the bus stop." Hanul set down his phone. "Collapsed?" "Exhaustion," they said. "Possibly anemia. She hasn't taken a sick day in 6 years, sir. Not one." Something tightened in his chest. Unfamiliar, uncomfortable. He tried to recall her face and found, with a jolt of shame, that he couldn't picture it clearly. 6 years, and he'd never really looked. "Which hospital?" Ji-woo blinked. "Sir, you have the Tokyo call at—" "Cancel it." He arrived at Seoul General still in his suit, standing stiffly outside her room until a nurse ushered him in. Lovely lay pale against white sheets, an IV taped to her thin wrist, looking smaller than he remembered, if he remembered her at all. Her eyes fluttered open. "Mr. Choi?" Her voice cracked with disbelief. "Why are you here?" "You didn't bring my tea," he said, and immediately hated how it sounded. She almost laughed, then winced from the pain. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll be back tomorrow." "No." The word came out harder than he intended. He sat down slowly in the chair beside her bed, somewhere he had never once sat in 6 years. "Tell me what happened. All of it." For the first time, Lovely realized he was actually listening. She hesitated before answering, her fingers twisting the hospital blanket. "My mother is sick, sir. Kidney failure. I work 2 jobs. Yours in the day, a restaurant at night. I send everything home to Busan for her treatments." She looked away. "I didn't want you to think I was asking for anything. I only wanted to keep my job." Hanul stared at her, something shifting behind his eyes. 6 years. You never said a word." "Would it have mattered?" she asked quietly. Not bitter, just honest. The question landed like a slap. He had no answer. Then something else surfaced. A memory he'd buried under years of boardrooms and grief. "Wait," he said slowly. "Busan. 6 years ago, a woman pulled a man out of a burning car on the coastal road near Hyundai." His voice dropped. "That was you." Lovely's breath caught. "You remember that?" "I was that man." He rubbed his jaw, stunned. "I never got your name. I looked for weeks and then I stopped. Told myself it was a coincidence I'd never solve." He met her eyes fully for the first time. "You've been in my house for 6 years and you never told me you were the reason I was alive to hire anyone at all." "I didn't want gratitude, sir," she whispered. "I only wanted you to be safe." That was enough for me. Hanul sat back, the weight of 6 wasted years pressing down on him. She had been right in front of him the entire time. While Hanul sat at her bedside, across the city, Do-yoon Choi, his cousin and second in command, watched the hospital security footage on his phone with narrowed eyes. He canceled the Tokyo deal for a maid, Do-yoon muttered to his assistant. Do you understand what that means? If Hanyul gets distracted, if he softens, the board will question his focus. And if his focus breaks, my seat on that board finally means something. He'd waited years for a crack in his cousin's armor. Now he had one. Find out everything about her, Do-yoon ordered. Every debt, every weakness. If she has family drowning in medical bills, there's always something to use. By evening, Do-yoon had a file. Lovely's mother's hospital records, her restaurant job, an unpaid loan from a small lender in Busan. He smiled coldly. Everyone has a price. Let's see if the tea lady has hers. The next morning, Do-yoon visited the small lending office quietly and bought the debt himself. $40,000, now his to call in whenever he chose. He didn't confront Lovely, not yet. He simply waited, the way a man waits before pulling a trigger, patient and precise, knowing exactly when the pressure would break her. Let Hanyul fall in love, he said to himself, watching the sunset from his office window. It will only make the fall harder when I take it all away. Lovely returned to the mansion a week later, still weak but insisting on working. Hanail had changed. He greeted her by name now, asked if she'd eaten, lingered a moment too long at the door some mornings. Ji-woo noticed first. He watches you when you're not looking, she whispered one afternoon, arranging linens. I've worked for him 8 years, I've never seen it. Lovely's cheeks warmed, but she shook her head. Don't say things like that. Why not? Maybe it's finally your turn. That evening, an unfamiliar man in an expensive coat approached her at the gate. Ms. Lovely? His smile didn't reach his eyes. My name is Do-yoon. I believe we should talk about your mother's debt. The one I now own. Her stomach dropped. What do you want? Simple, he said. Resign quietly. Leave Hanul's house tonight and never come back. And I'll forgive the loan entirely. Stay, he leaned closer, and I'll make sure your mother's hospital cuts off her treatment the moment I call in what you owe. You can't do that. I already have. He handed her a folder, the loan documents, transferred and signed. You have until midnight. If you were in Lovely's position, would you walk away to protect your family or stay and fight for the love you've waited 6 years for? Comment stay or walk. I want to know before Act 6. Lovely stood frozen at the gate, the folder trembling in her hands as the weight of an impossible choice settled over her. She didn't sleep that night. By 4 a.m., Lovely had made her decision. She packed the single suitcase she'd arrived with 6 years earlier, folded her uniform neatly on the bed, and wrote a letter she left on Hanyul's pillow before slipping out the side gate into the dark. Hanul, I have loved you quietly for 6 years, and I do not regret a single day of it. But I cannot let my mother suffer for something I want. Please don't look for me. Take care of yourself. That has always been enough for me. Lovely. He found the letter at dawn, his tea untouched beside it. He read it twice, then a third time, his hands unsteady in a way they never were, not even in the boardroom. Ji-woo, he shouted, already moving. Get me everything on her mother's hospital bill. Now. Within the hour, he'd learned everything. The debt, Do-yoon's involvement, the ultimatum. Rage settled into something colder, sharper. He walked into Do-yoon's office without knocking, slamming the folder Lovely had left behind onto the desk. You threatened her family to remove her from my life, Hanyul said, voice deadly quiet. You mistook my silence for weakness for 6 years, Do-yoon. That ends today. Do-yoon smiled thinly. I only did what you were too blind to do yourself. Protect this family's image. No, Hanyul said. You tried to take the one thing in this family that was never yours to touch. Hanyul bought out Lovely's mother's debt within the hour, then flew to Busan himself, tracking her through the one clue she'd left, a hospital address scribbled faintly on the back of the letter. He found her sitting in a corridor outside her mother's room, exhausted, her suitcase still at her feet. "You shouldn't have come," she said without looking up. "You shouldn't have left," he replied, sitting beside her the way he had at her hospital bed weeks before. He reached into his pocket and placed something small in her palm, a thin silver bracelet, tarnished with age. Lovely's breath caught. "Where did you get this?" "You dropped it on the coastal road 6 years ago, the night you pulled me from that car. I kept it, thinking I'd return it if I ever found you." His voice broke slightly. "I didn't know I already had." Tears slipped down her face. "My mother gave me this the day she got sick. I thought I'd lost it forever. Nothing about you has ever been lost on me. Lovely, I was just too buried in my own grief to see what was right in front of me." He took her hand. "Do-Yun no longer works for my company. Your mother's debt is gone. And I am done letting 6 years of silence cost us anything more." Think quote. For the first time, Lovely let herself believe this moment was real. "Why now?" Lovely whispered, still holding the bracelet like it might vanish. "Why not before?" Haniel exhaled slowly, searching for words he'd never had to use before. "Because I built walls after I lost my parents, and I let my work become the only thing I trusted. You brought me tea every morning for 6 years, and every morning I told myself I didn't have time to notice the person doing it." He met her eyes. "I was wrong. I had all the time in the world. I just wasted it." Lovely's mother, weak but awake in her hospital bed nearby, watched the exchange with tired, knowing eyes. "Is this the boss you've mentioned all these years?" she asked softly. Lovely flushed. "Ioma. She never stopped talking about you," her mother said to Hanul, smiling faintly. Even when there was nothing to talk about, Hanul turned back to Lovely, something steady and certain settling into his voice. "Then let there finally be something to talk about." He knelt slightly, taking her hands in his. 6 years of silence is enough. I don't want to be your boss anymore, Lovely. I want to be the man who finally sees you. Every morning for the rest of however many years you'll allow me." Lovely laughed through her tears, the first truly free laugh she'd allowed herself in years. "You're terrible with words, Haniel." "I know," he said, smiling for what felt like the first time in a decade. "Teach me." 3 months later, the Choi mansion looked the same from the outside. The same gates, the same gardens. Lovely had once tended in silence. But inside, everything had changed. At exactly 6:15 a.m., Haniel walked into the kitchen himself, 2 cups of tea already prepared, one strong and black, the way she liked it after months of him finally paying attention. Lovely looked up from the stove, laughing. "You're doing my job now?" "I'm doing our mornings now," he corrected, setting her cup down and pressing a kiss to her temple. "There's a difference." Her mother, fully recovered, sat at the table nearby, watching them with quiet joy. Jiwoo leaned in the doorway, grinning. 8 years I worked here, and I never thought I'd see him smile like that. Outside, the same roses Lovely once tended in solitude bloomed fuller than ever, tended now by both of them on quiet Sunday mornings. No longer a chore, but a ritual they shared. That evening, Hanul slipped the tarnished silver bracelet onto her wrist himself, right beside a new ring that caught the last light of the sunset. 6 years you watched me from the shadows, he said softly. I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to stand there again. If you believe real love is worth waiting for, no matter how long the silence lasts, type "worth the wait" in the comments. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes in second chances.